In a significant move aimed at bolstering national security, President Donald J. Trump has reinstated a travel ban that restricts entry into the United States for nationals from 12 countries deemed to pose substantial security risks. This proclamation, issued on June 4, 2025, follows a pattern established during Trump's first administration where similar restrictions were implemented and subsequently upheld by the Supreme Court. The current measures are part of a broader strategy to safeguard American citizens from potential terrorist threats and other public safety dangers. The proclamation emphasizes the necessity of rigorous vetting and screening processes for foreign nationals seeking entry into the United States. Trump stated it is the policy of the United States to protect its citizens from aliens who intend to commit terrorist attacks, threaten our national security, espouse hateful ideology, or otherwise exploit the immigration laws for malevolent purposes. The administration has identified a number of countries with inadequate screening and vetting practices which have led to the imposition of full or partial entry suspensions. The 12 countries facing full suspension are Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. Each of these nations has been highlighted for deficiencies in their ability to provide reliable information regarding their citizens as well as concerning histories related to terrorism and illegal immigration. For instance, Afghanistan is currently under Taliban control, which has severely hampered its ability to issue passports and maintain proper documentation. The Department of Homeland Security (DHS) reported alarming overstay rates for various visa categories from these countries, indicating a significant risk of non-compliance with U.S. immigration laws. In addition to the full suspensions, Trump announced partial restrictions for 7 additional countries: Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. These nations have been flagged for similar issues, including high rates of visa overstays and a lack of cooperation with the U.S. in accepting back their removable nationals. As Trump noted, some of the countries with inadequacies face significant challenges to reform efforts, indicating a willingness to engage diplomatically with those that show potential for improvement. The announcement comes at a time when the Trump administration is also focusing on delivering on its campaign promises related to immigration enforcement, including the mass deportation of undocumented migrants. Reports have emerged of increased enforcement actions, including the deportation of individuals labeled as gang members to countries like El Salvador, further illustrating the administration's commitment to strict immigration control. While the proclamation allows for certain exceptions, including for lawful permanent residents and dual nationals traveling on passports from non-designated countries, it underscores a stringent approach towards immigration. Critics of the ban argue that such measures disproportionately affect individuals fleeing violence and persecution, raising ethical concerns regarding the treatment of asylum seekers. In the wake of this announcement, the implications for international relations and the perception of the United States as a destination for immigrants remain to be seen. The Biden administration's previous policies aimed at easing immigration restrictions and providing protections to vulnerable populations now face a stark reversal under Trump's renewed leadership. As this situation develops, the effectiveness of the new restrictions in enhancing U.S. national security and their potential impact on foreign relations will be closely monitored. The administration's approach signals a continued emphasis on national security as a priority, shaping the future of U.S. immigration policy in the years to come. And the complex landscape of international trade. Recent developments signal a potential pivot for U.S.-China relations and broader implications for the global economy. As the Biden administration grapples with the fallout from President Trump's controversial tariffs, U.S. auto suppliers are urgently calling for action in response to China's tightened controls on rare earth exports. This situation has prompted fears of significant disruptions in automobile production, further complicating an already fragile trade environment. The Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association (MEMA) raised alarms on Wednesday about China's new restrictions on rare earth exports, warning that these materials, critical for car production and advanced technology, are predominantly processed in China, over 90% of the global supply. Major automotive players including General Motors, Ford, and Toyota have echoed MEMA's concerns. emphasizing that the curbs could exacerbate existing supply chain issues exacerbated by ongoing trade tensions. In a notable social media post, former President Trump acknowledged the difficulties in negotiating with Chinese President Xi Jinping, describing him as very tough and extremely hard to make a deal with. This candid admission reflects the growing unease within U.S. political circles regarding the prospects of a stable trade agreement, especially following a recent détente aimed at easing tariffs that now appears increasingly tenuous. Adding to the uncertainty, the White House has indicated that the self-imposed 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs is set to expire in early July, prompting calls from administration officials for partners to expedite trade negotiations. However, the landscape remains clouded by Trump's decision to double tariffs on steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%, which took effect just days ago, further straining relations not only with China but also with the European Union. The impact of these tariffs is being felt across various sectors. Procter & Gamble, for instance, announced plans to cut 7,000 jobs, approximately 6% of its workforce, citing higher costs and declining consumer demand linked to tariff uncertainties. The company's CFO noted that rising prices for essential goods were a direct consequence of the elevated tariffs, underscoring the broader economic implications of Trump's trade policies. In a bid to mitigate the fallout from these tariffs, companies like Fever-Tree Drinks have adopted strategies to share the burden of additional costs with partners rather than passing them on to consumers. Meanwhile, Japan is preparing to propose strengthened cooperation with the U.S. on rare earth supply chains as part of ongoing tariff discussions, highlighting the international ramifications of China's export restrictions. The economic sentiment in Europe and beyond is equally cautious. A recent survey by the Bank of England revealed that British firms are largely dismissing Trump's tariffs, yet there is palpable concern about the potential for retaliatory measures should trade negotiations falter. Additionally, the OECD has projected a significant slowdown in global economic growth due to ongoing trade disputes, with U.S. growth forecasted to decelerate sharply over the next few years. As tensions escalate, the urgency for a comprehensive trade strategy has never been more apparent. The complexities surrounding rare earth minerals and the broader repercussions of U.S. tariffs underscore the delicate balance of international trade relations. Companies and governments alike are now left to navigate a landscape fraught with uncertainty, as the outcomes of these negotiations will likely shape economic trajectories for years to come. Looking ahead, the intersection of trade policy and geopolitical strategy will remain a focal point for the Biden administration. With key deadlines approaching and mounting pressures from various sectors, the path forward will require deft negotiation skills and a willingness to adapt to an ever-evolving global economic landscape. On June 4, 2025, President Donald Trump unveiled a sweeping proclamation that reinstates travel restrictions on nationals from 12 countries while imposing partial restrictions on 7 others, reigniting a contentious debate over immigration and national security. This decision, echoing earlier travel bans from his first term, is framed by the administration as a necessary measure to safeguard the United States against potential terror threats and public safety risks. The countries facing a full entry ban include Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. In contrast, nationals from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela will face partial restrictions. The administration cited high visa overstay rates and inadequate vetting processes as primary reasons for these decisions, characterizing them as a blatant disregard for U.S. immigration laws. In the proclamation, Trump stated, "As president, I must act to protect the national security and national interest of the United States and its people." He emphasized the importance of engaging with countries willing to improve their information sharing and identity management protocols to mitigate terrorism-related risks. The move came shortly after a terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado, where the assailant, an Egyptian national, had overstayed his visa, highlighting the administration's focus on visa security. Critics of the ban, including advocacy groups and political commentators, have raised concerns that the proclamation will exacerbate divisions within the United States and vilify communities seeking safety and opportunity.
Abby Maxman, president of Oxfam America,
argued that the policy is less about national security and more about sowing division. This policy is not about national security, it is about sowing division and vilifying communities, she stated, reflecting broader concerns regarding the implications of such sweeping restrictions. Furthermore, the proclamation has sparked international reactions, with some nations such as Somalia expressing a willingness to collaborate with the U.S. to address security issues. Somali ambassador to the United States Tahir Hassan Abdi affirmed Somalia values its long-standing relationship with the United States and stands ready to engage in dialogue to address the concerns raised. In contrast, Venezuelan officials have condemned the U.S. government, labeling it fascist and warning their citizens of the risks of being in the United States. The implications of this proclamation extend beyond immediate travel restrictions.
Analysts note that the travel ban could further strain geopolitical tensions,
particularly as the U.S. grapples with its role on the global stage amidst ongoing tariff disputes, humanitarian aid cuts, and a complex immigration landscape. The measure could also face legal challenges reminiscent of those that accompanied Trump's first travel ban in 2017, which was ultimately upheld by the Supreme Court. As the administration moves forward with the implementation of these restrictions, which are set to take effect on June 9, 2025, the discourse surrounding immigration policy in the United States appears poised for renewed scrutiny and debate. Trump's decision reflects an ongoing commitment to a hardline immigration stance, a hallmark of his presidency that continues to resonate with his base while drawing fierce opposition from advocacy groups and political opponents. The unfolding impacts of this proclamation will likely shape the national conversation on immigration security and the United States' role as a global leader in the months to come. As the U.S. economy grapples with the ramifications of President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policies, recent analyses project a troubling economic landscape for the coming years. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD) forecasts a significant slowdown in U.S. growth, predicting a decline to 1.6% in 2025 from 2.8% the previous year, with a further dip to 1.5% anticipated in 2026. This downturn is largely attributed to the disruptive trade wars initiated by Trump, which have not only raised costs for consumers but have also instilled uncertainty among businesses. According to the OECD, the average tariff rate in the U.S. has surged from approximately 2.5% to an alarming 15.4%, marking the highest level since 1938. This dramatic increase in tariffs is poised to affect a wide array of sectors, particularly those reliant on imported materials. We have seen a significant increase in trade barriers as well as in economic and trade policy uncertainty, commented OECD chief economist Alvaro Pereira. This sharp rise in uncertainty has negatively impacted business and consumer confidence and is set to hold back trade and investment. The fallout from these policies is not limited to the United States. Global economic growth is projected to slow to just 2.9% in 2025, down from 3.3% in the previous year. China, the world's second-largest economy, is expected to experience a similar downturn, with growth decelerating from 5% to 4.7%. The impact of U.S. tariffs is likely to exacerbate challenges already faced by the Chinese economy, particularly in light of its struggling real estate market. In response, the Chinese government has outlined plans to stimulate the economy through interest rate cuts and increased spending on infrastructure and eldercare.
Meanwhile,
the Congressional Budget Office (CBO) has weighed in with predictions of its own, suggesting that Trump's tariff plans could reduce the federal deficit by $2.8 trillion over the next decade. However, this comes at a cost. The CBO estimates that these tariffs will lead to a shrinkage in the overall economy and an increase in inflation, with average rates expected to rise by 0.4 percentage points in 2025 and 2026. The analysis indicates that while the tariffs may reduce deficits, they will also reduce household wealth and purchasing power across the board. The CBO's findings echo concerns raised by other economic models, which project long-term GDP reductions of around 6% and wage declines of approximately 5% as a consequence of the tariffs.
The unpredictability of Trump's tariff announcements, often communicated via social media, adds another layer of uncertainty. As seen in his recent directive to double steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%. This decision, effective immediately, is likely to push prices up further for consumers and businesses alike. As the political landscape continues to evolve, recent legal challenges to Trump's tariff policies also add to the uncertainty. A federal court in New York recently blocked most of the tariffs imposed under an emergency powers law, although an appeals court has allowed their collection to continue while the case is reviewed. In conclusion, as the U.S. economy navigates the complexities of Trump's trade policies, the implications for consumers, businesses, and the broader global market remain profound and multifaceted. With economic forecasts suggesting a continued slowdown, the interplay between tariff policies, inflation, and overall economic health will be critical to monitor in the coming years. As the situation develops, both policymakers and economists will be watching closely to assess the long-term effects of these unprecedented trade measures. As tensions rise globally and questions abound regarding the future of U.S. defense spending, recent legislative developments have sparked significant concern and frustration among allies and stakeholders alike. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed an $895 billion defense spending bill that notably omits critical provisions for Ukraine, raising alarms about the future of American support for the war-torn nation. With President-elect Donald Trump signaling a potential reduction in aid, the ramifications of these decisions could reshape the landscape of international defense and security. On June 5, 2025, the House approved the defense bill without extending the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act, which had previously allowed for the expedited loan or lease of military equipment to Ukraine. The act, initially passed in May 2022, expired in September 2023 without any arms being supplied under its provisions. Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. Oksana Markarova expressed her disappointment, stating, "The embassy continues to actively work to preserve this mechanism," highlighting the urgent need for renewed support amid ongoing conflict with Russia. The legislation does allocate $300 million for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative USIA program aimed at supplying arms to Ukraine through contracts with U.S. defense firms, but critics argue that it falls short of what is necessary. The outgoing Biden administration has been hastily delivering arms to Ukraine, utilizing the remaining $4 to $5 billion in presidential drawdown authority as the clock ticks down to Trump's inauguration. Trump has already hinted at a shift in policy, suggesting a re-evaluation of U.S. assistance to Kyiv, which adds to the uncertainty faced by Ukrainian officials. Compounding these challenges, the recent election results have reinforced Republican control over both the House and Senate, signaling a potential shift in priorities regarding foreign aid. The Republican Party's resistance to expansive aid packages such as the $61 billion proposed earlier this year, which faced significant delays, underscores a growing skepticism towards long-term commitments to Ukraine. House Speaker Mike Johnson's rejection of President Biden's $24 billion aid proposal further illustrates this trend. Meanwhile, NATO's recent discussions in Brussels have positioned U.S. President Donald Trump's ambitious defense spending goals into a more viable framework. NATO leaders are expected to endorse a significant increase in defense spending, potentially raising the target from 2% to 5% of GDP, a move largely motivated by the escalating threats from Russia. This shift, while ambitious, raises questions about feasibility and commitment among member states that have historically struggled to meet existing expenditure benchmarks. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has suggested a 2032 deadline for achieving this new target, while U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker emphasized the need for realistic timelines and commitments. "We cannot have another Wales Pledge style where a lot of allies don't meet their commitments until year 10 or year 11, he stated, referring to the previous commitment made in 2014. As discussions continue, some nations have expressed hesitations regarding the proposed timeline, with debates emerging over the definitions of hard military spending versus defense-related expenses. Countries like Spain and Italy, which have only recently committed to meeting the 2% target, might find the leap to 5% particularly challenging.
as the international community watches closely. The implications of these legislative and diplomatic maneuvers are profound. The trajectory of U.S. support for Ukraine hangs in the balance, and the broader NATO alliance must navigate its own internal dynamics while responding to external threats. With the geopolitical landscape continuously evolving, stakeholders will be keenly aware of the potential shifts in strategy and commitment as the new administration takes office. The coming months will be crucial in determining not only the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations but also the cohesion and effectiveness of the NATO alliance in facing shared challenges. In a world increasingly shaped by complex geopolitical dynamics, the foreign policy maneuvers of U.S. President Donald Trump continue to evoke both intrigue and controversy. Recent developments highlight the tension between traditional U.S. alliances and a burgeoning willingness to engage with adversaries, particularly in the Middle East. Amidst ongoing conflicts, particularly in Gaza, Trump's administration has faced scrutiny for its diplomatic approach and its implications for both domestic and international relations. The most recent episode in this saga unfolded with the U.S. vetoing yet another United Nations resolution aimed at ending the war in Gaza. Despite some distancing from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and recent dealings involving the Houthis, Hamas and Iran, Trump has largely maintained the traditional U.S. stance on Gaza, reflecting a continuity that echoes the policies of his predecessors. This begs the question: what does the future hold for U.S.-Israel relations and the broader Middle Eastern geopolitical landscape? Aaron David Miller, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, noted the increasingly strained relationship between the U.S. and its allies in the region, suggesting that the current trajectory could lead to unpredictable outcomes. He pointed out that Trump's diplomatic style is marked by a blend of unpredictability and opportunism, often prioritizing his personal interests over established diplomatic norms. "What's good for me is good for America," he quipped, encapsulating the president's transactional approach to international relations. Simultaneously, tensions surrounding U.S.-Iran relations have further complicated the diplomatic landscape. Reports indicate that the Trump administration is considering a nuclear deal that would permit Iran to continue low-level uranium enrichment, a move that has elicited mixed reactions within the U.S. political sphere. On one hand, this proposed deal aims to address Iran's nuclear ambitions while allowing for civilian energy production. On the other, it runs the risk of alienating pro-Israel factions that advocate for a more hardline stance against Tehran. As Andrew Day from the American Conservative articulated, the administration's mixed signals regarding Iran's enrichment capabilities reflect a broader strategy designed to navigate the treacherous waters of domestic and international criticism. On the one hand, it delays the onslaught of attacks from pro-Israel elements who will not be satisfied with any deal with Iran, he explained. This duality highlights a critical challenge for Trump, balancing the demands of hawkish factions while seeking pragmatic solutions that could lead to de-escalation. Moreover, the potential economic ramifications of a nuclear deal with Iran cannot be overlooked. A recent study suggested that lifting sanctions could unlock significant economic benefits for both nations, including the creation of hundreds of thousands of jobs in the U.S. This prospect aligns with Trump's business-oriented mindset, suggesting that he may be more amenable to compromise than previously anticipated. However, achieving this would necessitate navigating the minefield of opposition from hardliners who favor a strict, maximum-pressure approach. As the administration continues to grapple with these multifaceted challenges, the implications for U.S. foreign policy are profound. The juxtaposition of Trump's approach to Iran with his long-standing support for Israel underscores a broader tension within U.S. foreign policy, one that seeks to reconcile competing interests while avoiding a descent into conflict. In conclusion, as President Trump pursues a path that combines elements of aggression with unexpected diplomacy, the coming months will be critical in determining not only the future of U.S. relations with Iran and Israel but also the broader geopolitical landscape. With multiple diplomatic fronts to manage, including the ongoing crisis in Gaza and the uncertain future of U.S.-Iran negotiations, the administration's next moves will be closely scrutinized by both allies and adversaries alike. The question remains, can Trump navigate this complex terrain effectively, or will his approach lead to deeper divisions on the global stage? Only time will reveal the answers.